you were given the magic elixir once again to make a difference in the perspective or the interaction of the community, from your law enforcement perspective, what is it that, whether reasonable or unreasonable, what is it that you would want to see happen?
I can give you a long answer on this one, but well, I guess in general, you hit it partially too, in that we're in the midst of like social angst, and a lot of good can come from that, and some bad comes out of it too. And for me, it's been an awakening, and I think if for those who aren't law enforcement, probably a lot of people across the country, if you haven't taken the time to study inequality in our country, take the time to do it. And I by no means am an expert on it, but there have been some terrible things that have happened to the African American community over a long period of time, and poor and impoverished communities in general, not just the African American. And I'm not just talking about slavery, but we're talking, Jim Crow laws, but housing. And like for me, housing was an awakening to me. Like you have a picture of, you have your city, and you have good neighborhoods and not so good neighborhoods, and this seems to be everywhere you go in a big city. This happens, and it's what I found is it's not by accident. I mean, there were like specific policies enacted, after the Great Depression that led to communities being divided up and the haves getting more and the have-nots getting less, and it's still dealing with that today. And I guess it feels like the weight of it for a law enforcement officer is it feels like the weight of this issue is all on our shoulders, and that we are the forefront. And if we have to be the forefront to generate positive change, I'm all for it. But if I have my magic wand, it's waving it to everyone and saying, take a look in the mirror before you condemn all law enforcement, and realize that this system that we are, if you haven't awakened to the inequalities, well, research it and educate yourself. But it's been caused by everybody, and it's not just law enforcement, and we're not going to solve this inequality by ourselves. And so, we can be a part of it, and we are a part of it, and we should address what we've done wrong as everyone else should too. But, how do you take a magic wand and make housing equal for everyone when it's been unequal for this long period of time? Well, if you're a housing planner or you work in that industry, like that's the kind of stuff you need to be coming up with. Like, how do we ensure that these like poor families get loans that weren't getting them before? Things because here's what we need. Like, we need within our communities to not have a poor community, a rich community, a black community, a white community. We need a community that interacts together. And we're only going to have that when this divide gets further intertwined. We have to be intertwined with each other. And we can't just be like, I remember your friend Chris, when he explained the Black Lives Matter movement to me, it was an awakening for me, because I've never, in my head, I've always been like, well, if you want to have equality, you got to do this, and you have to do this, and we have these pictures of like, this is how you're going to fix it, but it's not. It shouldn't be about you're going to do it. It shouldn't be about it should be how are we going to do this, and viewing like, I think his analogy was, black lives are the heart, but we're all part of the body, and if you've got your hands and your feet, that doesn't mean they're not important. But like right now, the black lives are under attack, and it's like you're having a heart attack, and you've got to work. We have to treat this as our body and our community, and we just don't have that right now in our country. I mean, we have it in some places, but in general, there's just, and probably won't make the cut, but like, do you really want to? If you really want equality, you have to all be willing to be together and live together. And when you're choosing what communities you want to live in, like, why are you choosing where you're going to live, and why, it's like these things. I mean, if rich people only want to live in rich neighborhoods and continue to be rich, then their tax base is going to continue to be richer, and they're going to continue to have better resources, and they're going to continue to. And if we don't allow the lower income individuals and families to raise their level up, and we don't mix together and create like unity, and I don't know, maybe I'm not making a lot of sense, but like to me, if I could go back in time and eliminate the housing inequality problem that we've had in this country, I think it would do a lot to bring our communities together. Like if we could really have like, and it's not just housing, but housing it drives income, and income drives, family bonds and everything else. And I mean, on a secondary note, and this may not be the case either, but in my personal experience, the what really breaks my heart is, and I found in my investigation of gangs, is the lack of fatherhood that we're facing. And this is not just a rich, poor, white or black, but I feel like it is exacerbated in impoverished communities, in that we are raising generations of kids who do not have any male role models to speak of. And in the same way that I want to have our issues as police addressed, and I want to have issues, inequality in housing addressed, like if we cannot take a look at our family unit and our structure and realize that, I mean, the statistics I look at was like 3 out of 4 families growing up without another parent. I mean, if we continue to be like this, it's not sustainable. And I just, just to see kids have no direction. I mean, it's just when I see them later in life and I'm dealing with suspects and I hear their stories, and just to be on your own and not have like a male role model to be involved in your life. And again, that's not necessarily race specific, but I think it does drive a lot of the inequality and a lot of the lower income, and just in general, it's to me a huge component of what's missing in like looking at the violence and some of the things that we see across our country, and the only, or it's not the only explanation, but to me a big reason for that is just not have a dad there to be like, you're not leaving the house tonight. I don't know, that's a very simplified version, but it's like, you're gonna come home, this is your family, you're gonna the structure, the rules, the discipline, all the things that come with being a father and having a father in your life. And it's a tough thing to say, but it's definitely something that, if you can mentor or you can do whatever you can do, there is a desperate need for male leadership, male role models in all our communities. But I think particularly to try to heal this division.
Yeah, that's good. I'd be kind of fishing if I said I didn't really agree that he basically hit the nail on the head with, if you really keep going, if you look at an issue and you go, but why? And then when somebody gives you that simple answer, you go, but why? And then when they give you a little more detailed answer, you go, but why? Until you get to really what's the true heart of the issue. I think it does start with the family. I mean, family units are historically there's a reason God designed family units as the way he did. And it is true. It's not race specific, and it's not even socioeconomic specific. I see no difference in, unfortunately, anybody can conjure an idea of a child who grows up impoverished with a father who's physically not present because he, died at an early age because he worked in the coal mines or he's in prison, whatever the case is. And this child who lives in a beautiful house in the best neighborhood in town, goes to a great school, but dad has made that decision at some point that career progression is more important than the family unit, and he's never present, either physically or mentally. And next thing you know, we're going to mansions where a 17-year-old has died of a heroin overdose because dad wasn't, something was missing in their life, and that's how they tried to fill the void. I see no difference between those two pictures at the end of the day. The root issue is there's just no family structure to support them. And it doesn't, I wouldn't say it always has to be mom or dad. I mean, I see people who are incredibly successful, they're raised by their grandmother, their grandfather, and they're still successful because they still had a strong family unit at some level. But it does start with, parents, obviously. I mean, just being accountable for your children and investing time in your children. Ultimately, and we're all probably hypocrites when we say this, but ultimately, your children are what your legacy is going to be and what your best product that you're going to give the world is going to be. So it's easy to spend 40 hours a week at a job that at the end of the day will not matter, but we don't spend 40 hours a day investing in our children. And realistically, some of that is not practical. We have to pay the bills, we have to feed our family, but time with your family, it cannot be replaced. I don't think it can, a dollar value can be put on it because, like I said, it affects all socioeconomic classes. And I think if we could just start with stronger family units and then take those bricks, kind of like that wall, you take each one's a family, and then the wall is now a broader community of your neighborhood or your church with all these families together. And then you get a bunch of those churches or a bunch of those neighborhoods that now build a strong structural house. It's just, but without the small individual bricks, you're never going to get to the wall, you're never going to get to the building, et cetera, et cetera. You have to start small with a lot of the biggest issues have the smallest solutions, which is what makes them tricky, I think, because nobody's getting on the news or getting airtime saying, hey, if you spend more time with your kids, that'll help us as a country. Because it's just not what people want to hear. They want to hear something new, something flashy. But unfortunately, the story's been the same.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and I think we have to address the unfairness of the question. I said one thing, and what we've been saying the whole time is it's not as easy as one thing. And so I appreciate your openness to go to what, if you could boil it down, but also hearing the tension in both of your answers of like, this is a very important thing, but this is just one small step of many things that we need to do to help us get to a place where we look more and more like the nation that I think we dream of, and for us Christ followers, more like the fullness of God's kingdom. So I realize that the question's a little unfair because it is quite a bit more weighty than just a single answer.